morning, Scotland. Good morning, social media land. I hope you are well. It is Thursday, the 25th of October, 2024. Before we get into the meat and bones of today's video, I want to offer you to accept the context of this content. This is very important. I talk about not having English-based parties in a Scottish Parliament quite often. I believe that they are disruptive and serve a different set of masters and can never truly serve Scotland's best interests. Whereas pro-Scottish parties serve the Scottish people, Labour, the Lib Dems and the Tories, who all may have Scottish in their names, serve, as we have demonstrated on Monday's video, that they serve the Westminster-based Anglo-centric Unionist parties, basically making their seats in Holyrood no more than caretaker positions for the Anglo-centric Westminster English-based Unionist parties. Someone said in Facebook comments that it was not helpful to call someone like Willie Rennie anti-Scottish. Understand clearly from the outset, that's not what this is about. He may not be anti-Scottish per se, but he is certainly pro-union, and that makes him nowhere near what we need as a representative voted into the Scottish Parliament to serve the Scottish people. How can he serve the Scottish people if he serves the Union first? A party of the Union will never place the interests of Scotland at the top of their agenda. Never. They will never challenge Westminster for the true benefit of Scotland and her people. So, people like Willie Rennie, a Unionist, is serving truly around 50% of the Scottish people. That's great representation. But do only 50% of the Scottish people benefit from the baby boxes, the Scottish child payment or free prescriptions? 100% of Scots benefit from these policies. The present Scottish Government may have 50% of the electorate not aligning with their views on independence, and the fact as well that they are not a Westminster-based Unionist Anglo-centric party, but that doesn't stop them serving, to the best of their abilities, all of the Scottish people. I can honestly say that the pro-union parties and their extensions in Scotland will never serve us the way that the pro-Scottish parties will. And that's important to understand for today's video. So now that we have the context of today's video, I'll begin. Take a moment to imagine living in a country where political parties claim to represent you, but in reality, their loyalties lie elsewhere. This is the reality of Scotland's political landscape today, where the Unionist parties, the Scottish Conservatives, Scottish Labour and the Scottish Liberal Democrats are anything but Scottish. They appear to have regional autonomy, but they are tied to the decisions, priorities and financial systems of their Westminster counterparts. The question is, how can these parties ever put Scotland first when their loyalty is to London? When you dig deeper into how these parties operate, it becomes clear that they are not independent Scottish entities. According to the Electoral Commission, all political parties across the United Kingdom must comply with the same registration rules, financial oversight and party structures. Whether in Scotland, England or Wales, the same regulations apply. This means that so-called Scottish Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats are just regional branches of the UK-wide political machines. They are financially dependent on their mother organisations operating under their rules and direction. How can they possibly put Scotland's interests ahead of the UK's when their very existence is tied to Westminster? These parties are not truly accountable to the Scottish people. They are accountable to their leadership in London. The Electoral Commission's regulations on accounting units and financial schemes ensure that these parties remain financially and structurally intertwined with their UK-wide counterparts, leaving little room for truly independent Scottish decision-making. In essence, these parties cannot escape the gravitational pull of Westminster, no matter how hard they try to claim Scottish identity. The implications of this are profound. Under current UK law, Scotland is helpless to demand that only fully independent Scottish parties operate within its devolved parliament. Holyrood may have the power to legislate on devolved matters like education and health, but it does not have the authority to change the constitutional structures that allowed UK-wide parties to dominate. Even if 2/3 of Holyrood voted to pass legislation requiring political parties to be registered and funded solely in Scotland, Westminster would still have the last say. Under the Scotland Act of 1998, party registration and constitutional issues remain reserved powers. Scotland's ability to reform the system is constrained by a legal framework that protects the Union at all costs. The framework forces Unionist parties in Scotland to prioritise the survival of the Union over the unique needs of Scotland. A clear example of this is Brexit. In 2016, Scotland voted decisively to remain in the European Union, yet the Scottish Conservative Party fell in line with Westminster's pro-Brexit stance. They not only accepted Brexit, but over time supported increasingly hardline versions of it, including a no-deal Brexit if necessary. When forced to choose between the interests of the Scottish electorate and their loyalty to the UK Conservative Party, the Scottish Tories chose Westminster every single time. This loyalty to Westminster undermines the very legitimacy of devolution. Devolution was meant to give Scotland a degree of autonomy, a chance to make decisions for herself on matters that affect its people. But if the parties sitting in Holyrood are just taking their orders from London, how can Scotland ever truly govern itself under devolution? The Scottish Conservatives' unwavering support for Brexit, despite Scotland's opposition, shows how Unionist parties will always choose to protect the Union, even at Scotland's expense. The situation is no better with Scottish Labour. While the party initially opposed Brexit, it has since accepted it, with their UK Labour leader, Keir Starmer, now pledging to make Brexit work. Scottish Labour has mirrored this stance, failing to make rejoining the EU a central part of its platform, even though such a move would align itself with the will of the Scottish voters. This unwillingness to oppose UK-wide Labour policy once again highlights that these parties are more concerned with following orders from Westminster than standing up for the Scottish electorate. It gets worse with Scottish Labour, because they're prepared to sacrifice the lives of Scottish pensioners due to their alignment with Mother Labour in Westminster. The Labour Party's own report has stated as many as 4,000 or more pensioners may die. May fucking die as a result of scrapping of the universal winter fuel payment. How can Anis Sarwar look at himself in the mirror? How can Jackie Baillie sleep at night knowing that they have voted to align themselves with such a policy that actually threatens the lives of the people they serve? I just don't get that. And yet we have seen people, citizens of Scotland, that wave the jack and sing Rule Britannia. Well, what if it was your grandma that died because of Westminster? And what if that could easily have been prevented by an act of unity from the parties within Holyrood, pro-Union and pro-Scottish, demanding action from Westminster? At least that would have been something. Now, that would really be serving the Scottish people. But let's now talk about the Scottish Liberal Democrats, and they too face a similar dilemma. They have traditionally been pro-European, but like all other Unionist parties, they are unable to distinguish themselves from their UK counterparts. While they continue to advocate for EU membership, their policy positions are dictated by the broader Liberal Democrat Party in Westminster. As a result, they fail to offer a truly independent version for Scotland and instead operate as a regional branch of a UK-wide organisation. At the heart of this issue is a fundamental tension between unionism and devolution. Unionist parties are committed to maintaining the United Kingdom, even if that means undermining devolution in practice. The Brexit negotiations provide a stark example of this. When powers repatriated from the EU after Brexit could have been devolved to Holyrood, Westminster chose to retain these significant areas of policy. Unionist parties in Holyrood did not challenge this centralisation of power. Instead, they supported it, showing that once again their loyalty lies with Westminster and not with Scotland. As long as these Unionist parties continue to dominate the political conversation in Holyrood, Scotland will never be able to fully govern itself. These parties will always be beholden to their UK counterparts, and their first loyalty will always be to the Union. This really makes the case for independence all the more compelling. Only through independence can Scotland ensure that its political parties are truly Scottish, that they represent the interests of the people of Scotland, and that they are no longer bound to serve Westminster. Scotland's political future cannot be shaped by parties whose loyalties lie elsewhere. As long as the Scottish Conservatives, Scottish Labour and Scottish Liberal Democrats continue to take their cues from London, Scotland's interests will always come second. Independence is the only way for Scotland to put its people and its own interests first. Only by breaking free from the constraints of the Union can Scotland ensure that its political parties are truly Scottish and that they work for Scotland and not for Westminster. So when I get accused of being anti-English, I will agree that I am anti-English political entity. But understand, my dad is English, my uncles and cousins are English. I don't hate the English people, but I just can't stand a government hundreds of miles away making decisions for my people in Scotland. And what I can't fathom even more is why we allow Westminster-based, Unionist, Anglo-centric parties to even debate in our Parliament when they are clearly never going to serve the interests of Scotland before the interests of the Union. How do we fix this? Well, we use the only weapon that we have to eliminate as many Westminster-based Unionist Anglo-centric MSPs from Holyrood as we possibly can. I was accused of promoting a gerrymandering agenda for the 2026 Holyrood election because I want to use my second vote and encourage every Scot that puts Scotland before the interests of the Union to use their second vote in a non-constituency based party or individual that is pro-Scottish. Basically, SNP won any other independence party or independence individual on the list. This is not gerrymandering. This is legal democracy at work, because there is nothing at all in the rules of a Scottish electoral process that stipulates you must vote for the same entity in both your votes. I want to leave you with a thought and a question now. First of all, consider your political loyalty as an ally to the Union. If you are voting both votes SNP, you can believe in the SNP. I do. I'm a card-carrying member of the SNP. I attend conferences. But even with a majority, they will never be able to obtain a Section 30 order to hold a second referendum. That's the thought you need to consider. Now ask yourself this. If I could use my second vote to place a more pro-Scottish, more pro-independence set of MSPs into the seats across the opposition benches, let's say another 30 of them, would I not be happier having these pro-Scottish, pro-independence individuals debating and discussing issues that matter to Scotland, rather than listening to the vultures squawking from the branches that serve the Westminster, Union-based, Anglo-centric parties? Yeah, that's a question. Let's reflect for a moment. We've talked and shown quite openly that the parties of union are never going to put Scotland first. They're never going to put the interests of your mum and dad, your grandparents and your kids before the interests of their party and their leadership based out of Westminster. It's just not going to happen. They've proven that with the Labour and Liberal Democrats when they were in power in Holyrood. They never pushed the boundaries of devolution the way that the SNP did. And love them or hate them, the SNP are the party of government. They are the leading party of independence, regardless of how you feel about them. And we should use that. We should utilise their strength on the political basis and our ability to make the pro-Scottish representation in Holyrood even stronger. That is so important and a massive step towards independence. A pro-independent government and a pro-independent opposition in Holyrood serves Scotland far better than a pro-Scottish government fighting against a pro-union opposition. And that's where we'll leave it today. Listen, I'm doing a live stream tomorrow night at 11 o'clock on YouTube, Facebook and TikTok. It'd be great if you could join us. Starts at 11 o'clock. Look at the advert after this to see where and when. Thank you for watching. And until I see you tomorrow, you have a great, great day.
I can't get no sleep.